And we're back. In this video, I'll give you an introduction to the poems that we're reading by Elizabeth Bishop. I feel like these introductions are a little bit more necessary for poetry um, because it's denser. There's a lot of connective tissue and predictable structure in something like, say, a play or fiction that we may not see in poetry. I mean, poetry is very condensed and it's very rich in that way, but sometimes that feels more intimidating or less doable for people. I would like to have you keep in mind that all knowledge about any work of literature is partial, and interpretations are neither right or wrong. They're either well supported or they're poorly supported by referring back to that text. So, looking at the first poem, The Fish, on page 73, um, what I can tell you about that one is it's a very simple narrative poem that's about a person who finds this tough old fish, and it creates an almost epiphany like moment for that poetic voice. And this is really fantastic in that it's kind of a meditation on enduring and not giving up. And, also having a certain amount of, how can we put it, respect for those who endure. Now, the next poem we'll be looking at um, will be In the Waiting Room. And a lot of critics think this is one of the best poems of the 20th century. And what's really important about it, especially, I think this is kind of like the most textbook confessional or domestic poem by Bishop, is that it takes through a young girl's realization that she is connected to other women. She is part of a larger group. In this poem, it's her aunt Consuelo, and she's in the waiting room of a dental office, and she hears like some kind of gasp coming from in there from her aunt. Now, when this all happens, she kind of has that moment of like, well, that's just my aunt, whatever my aunt is doing. But then she slowly starts to come to this realization that, wait, I am part of this larger group because I too am female and I am also a member of this family. And this is kind of a recognition that we all have, I think, in some broad way when we're younger. It was that when we realize not only am I me, I am an I, and nobody else is my I, right? Nobody else has my consciousness. Um, we are connected to those others in our life, especially those close family members. And sometimes that's a great thing, like, hey, this is my crew. I got people here. But other times it feels scary, confining, limiting even. I think we've also all had that moment where we think, this family, you kidding me? This is what I have to deal with. What what do we even have in common? And so that realization comes to her in these deep rolling waves. In a way, she's feels like she's falling off. She says at one point in the poem, um, falling off the round turning world into cold blue black space. And there's also a scene where she's looking at a National Geographic that has some pictures of some naked natives in there too, and that too kind of becomes like a moment of awareness, but also anxiety too. Wait, I'm a human being. I am a female, not unlike these females too. But in some ways, it's about this point in one's life when a child realizes that not only am I an I, but I am also part of a we. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, it's going to be kind of a slow read, but it's a very thoughtful, inward-looking poem. And the last poem we'll be looking at by Elizabeth Bishop will be One Art on page 89. Now, One Art is a sestina. It's got a uh, very strict structure to it, where there are repeated lines in the first, second, fourth, and sixth stanzas. And this poem is all about losing things. The art of losing isn't hard to master is one of the lines that gets repeated again and again in this poem. And this is really interesting because it kind of goes against what we might want to desire. We usually don't want to lose things. Usually it stresses us out, right? Um, but the whole poem is encouraging the reader to keep on losing things. Accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent, etc. And lose faster, lose farther, lose faster. And sometimes we do have to lose things. And losing things is also, another way of saying letting go of things, right? Sometimes we say that, very conversationally. You need to lose that guy. He's no good for you at all. That kind of thing. The other way we can continue to look at it is when we get to that last stanza, suddenly it's not about losing things, it's about losing a person. And here's where that domestic poetry movement really kicks in. I'm going to spoil it for you a little bit here, but you're going to read the poem anyway. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. So the fact that the poetic voice has to urge itself to say, no, write it down, adds like a new wrinkle into the whole motivation of the poem and what's going inside that poetic voice. If you have to convince yourself to say something or write something, it means there's a conflict going on. So this person wants perhaps to lose this person, be done with the relationship, to lose that occupation that person has in their mind. But sometimes that person keeps on worming their way back into our minds, back into, the front of our thoughts. So it's about that push to keep that person out, to keep moving forward, to keep losing. And anyway, that'll wrap us up for Elizabeth Bishop. Hope you enjoy the poems, and I'll talk to you soon.